I'm posting in silence. I'm taking a moment of silence. Since nobody's watching, I don't have to talk. I'm just posting this to make it official that there's 309 million people in 72 countries that are facing famine or food crisis. So the question is, how come this isn't being talked about more? Um, so somebody posted a comment that they live in Iowa, and last summer Iowa was one rainfall away from total crop loss. Hey, I'm just discussing our imminent um, global famine. We have a record 309 million people facing food crisis this summer, this year, according to the UN. Please post a comment or a question. We can talk about whatever you want, but my question is just reviewing the information. How bad do people think it's going to be? Because even the Midwest says that they are already in moderate drought and it's probably going to get worse. They're hoping for more snow or rain. Hello. Yeah, all is well. Did you partake in the meditation today? I'm just wondering. I have started extending the meditation another hour. So we're doing 2 hours of sitting meditation now, along with the 45 minutes of standing meditation. All right, rock on. So, yeah, I'm just fascinated by the fact that this imminent global food emergency is not being discussed more. Obviously, the famine in Gaza has been on the news because it's been, so terrible to see these kids wasting away as skeletons. Um, but anyway, but even in the Midwest where we have, we have like, we'll have like 12,000 homeless people in in Minnesota, or you go to Chicago and there's like 30,000 homeless people. So obviously there's people who are dependent on so-called food, whatever, free food or whatever. But the question is if we have drought again, how are we going to even grow any food? Because somebody in Iowa, they posted a comment how Iowa was one rainfall away from total crop loss last summer. Maybe it wasn't that bad, but they got lucky because it rained. We got a lot of rain at the end of the summer in the Midwest, and so that saved the crop. But they don't really know. They're just, so then they say, well, we have crop insurance, but that's just money. That's not food. Like, you can't eat money. So if anybody has any comments about this, they're officially saying that 309 million people will need food assistance this year, will be in a food crisis in 72 countries. Now that's the UN, but I think I think just like they've underestimated global warming, I think they've underestimated the food crisis. Hey Sandy, I'm just want to talk about the official rating now is 309 million people will be in food crisis in 72 countries this year, but I think it's going to be worse because the Midwest. Well, I mean, okay, I suppose we can grow algae, right? We can eat algae. We can all start growing algae, but we you have to get algae. You have to get the culture to grow it. You have to get a live culture from a lab somewhere to start growing spirulina. Um, I don't know. I'm not really a survivalist. I'm more just fascinated by the um the conundrum, like how we live in this high tech world of the information superhighway, but there's not really been much discussion. I haven't seen any discussion about the possibility of the Midwest not getting a crop this summer because of El Nino with abrupt global warming. And I just looked it up, and they're saying that we are already in moderate drought, and they're saying that they know from global warming that this is the new norm. And then they're saying, well, we got rain at the end of the season last summer, so they're basically just saying, well, hopefully we'll get rain, but they don't know, and they're just like, you got to realize, like, every little region in the world, pr- most people, they live, they pretty much or live in their region, like maybe they live on the East Coast or the Southeast or whatever, like the Midwest. Um, but obviously the Midwest is it's a farm country. Well, unless you live in the Twin Cities. I mean, I didn't know much about farms at all. I still don't know much about farms, but I know enough to it's like I read somebody's comment that Iowa, they almost lost their crop last summer. Luckily, we got some rain. Um, I just personally think it doesn't look very good. And so the Midwest, I mean, we grow mainly just like commodity crops, right? So we grow wheat in the north and then corn and soybeans. And so that's all animal feed. That goes all to animal feed or ethanol. Um, but obviously it still mainly goes in the food supply somehow. It's either goes into animal feed or into like wheat, whatever wheat products, bread and all that, cereal and um I just think that the the drought this summer, if the official prediction is already 309 million people, which is already that's like a record high number of people that are going to need food assistance from famine and whatever, war, whatever other kind of collapse of civilization and all that. But my guess is going to be like twice that many. Anybody else have any other guess? How many how bad do we think the famine is going to be this summer? What, Sandy, you just did your show that you read that guy's Substack about the summer already in the southern hemisphere. The drought's already been really bad, right? So they already have famine, right, in Sudan and Ethiopia. Um, but what about the food crop in Australia, and have you heard anything about that? New Zealand, and have they I can search it. I posted in the video description. I just did a search. I didn't search like Australia and New Zealand right now. Like what have they lost right now? But yeah, my guess is that just as abrupt global warming has been underestimated, my guess is that the food supply is that there's been a great underestimation of just how bad the drought's going to be. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you hear about individual crops that are not surviving. Like in Washington, Washington State, they lost their grape crops, but that was due to the Arctic amplification. So basically, you just had this extreme weather. But um, yeah, I just wanted to put this out here because I looked it up and I was kind of surprised. I mean, the official number is 309 million people are going to need help, food supplies this year. Right. Yeah, right. Then you have Mexico City about to run out of water. Forgot about that. I mean, it's not looking good. Like we're talking about like this summer, it's to me, it's like I think things could get really bad really fast because you can't eat money. You know, money. I mean, obviously, everybody needs money these days, but when it comes down to it, you need water, you need food. Which if you have land, you can grow food. Hopefully, like Sandy grows a lot of her own food. It's impressive. That's great. I used to grow a lot of my own food, and then I worked for farm. I've been working for farm businesses for the past 10 years, over 10 years. I started working on farms like in 1997. I worked on a farm full time. That was basically just like a big garden. We had a tractor, but you have to. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have my mushroom farm. That's my official business, and I've been trying to drive down a well pipe um because of the drought. I used to rely on the spring rain runoff for my stock tanks for water. Okay, cool. Nice. Yeah, the whole starting things. I think we had starter plants. Um yeah, so anyway, I yeah, I gotta get back. I gotta keep at it. My mushroom farm is in northern Minnesota. I bought land in northern Minnesota in like the coldest part of the lower 48, one of the coldest spots in the lower 48. But they're still experiencing a faster heating rate because they're closer to the Arctic, so they're getting that more dramatic heating difference. Even though it's still cold, it's heating up faster. And yeah, I planted hazelnut trees and stuff, but I just think like it will, again, I mean, I looked up Raphael Jovine. Are you going to try to interview Raphael Jovine? Eh, the guy that he has the double PhD in marine biology. He run his company's called Brilliant Planet. I'm sure you could talk to him. That would be great if you could interview him. He says that if he gets enough funding, he can sequester 10 billion tons of CO2 a year. Well, I don't have a link to his company. I mean, I can Google it right now. Yeah, it's just brilliantplanet.com. Hello. Yeah, I'm sure. Um, we're just talking about the like, okay, like I watch corporate news and stuff, and Thanks, Sandy. That'd be great. Because again, it sounds silly, but algae can sequester CO2 at 50 times the rate of any other organism on Earth. And I know I keep repeating this over and over, but oil is from algae, so it's pretty simple. Now, why does it get overlooked? Because it's too simple. That's why. Because we live in this high tech. Most people grow up in cities. I grew up in a city, so we're just too detached from. I mean, you know, I grew up next to a lake also, so I saw the scum on the lake. I don't know if it was algae or just plankton or what, but they had to bring in weed eating machines. I think I don't know what are the phosphorus maybe was from laundry detergent. I've been trying to figure this out, but anyway. Hey, Koi Kane, were you in the meditation class this morning? I'm just wondering. One person said they were in the meditation. I've added a second hour of sitting meditation, so it's like become this epic, like 2.5, maybe almost 3 hours of qigong. What are we going to do about the methane in the air? That's a good point, right? Well, the methane, it's yeah, exactly. Well, that's see, the methane turns into CO2. So obviously, right, like if the methane, there you go. That's what it's all about. So, like for example, there's the 1,200 gigatons of pressurized methane in the world's largest ocean shelf, the Eastern Siberian Arctic Shelf. And the latest paper from that Natalia Shakova co-authored, they documented that the methane has increased, and that it's already emitting more methane than the rest of the Arctic tundra combined, like all the permafrost on the land. The ESAS methane is already emitting more into the atmosphere, and that hasn't been in the news at all. It just gets ignored. And then the other thing is, it's already more methane than the rest of the oceans combined. That ESAS methane going into the atmosphere. And so yeah, like Natalia Shakova says, if there's just a 50 gigaton abrupt eruption, that will double the atmospheric temperature. Now, when you look at the heat amount in the atmosphere, it's about, I think it's like 40, about 40 gigatons increase from the the end of the ice age. And so um about like 20, like at least 22 gigatons have been from human caused global warming. I'm sorry, not gigatons, zettajoules of heat. But then you figure there's already over 400 extra zettajoules of heat in the oceans, and that will be being released. That will get released into the atmosphere eventually at an accelerating rate, as Jim Massa has been emphasizing. And so yeah, like the I, like the algae, they've had these algae blooms, and then what they're trying to do is to then sequester that algae when it's causes these toxic algae blooms that are caused from the runoff, from the phosphorus runoff from the agriculture. So yeah, it's a big mess, but oh really? Oh nice. I hope Jim got enough donations. I tried to donate to him, but I couldn't, like literally that buy me a coffee. That's the first time I tried ever using it, and it just did not work. the AMOC collapse was something I hadn't thought about until recently. Well, do you ever watch Guy McPherson? Because he has a recent video where he reads a paper saying that actually because the oceans are so warm, and this is and Jim Massa has been making this claim also that even if AMOC does collapse, it's not going to like cool down Europe like everybody's been claiming. Apparently, it's it's still going to be warm because the this is what Guy McPherson, if you go to his channel, he reads from a paper that's saying that actually even if AMOC collapses, that it's not going to cause the effect that everybody thought because of global warming because the oceans are so hot. Um, but at any rate, yeah. So the overall trend, obviously, is I mean, uh, like with AMOC collapsing, that's obviously not a good thing, right? Because it messes up the whole food chain also, and so yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, you got like, I mean, okay. I was mentioning how they covered. I think it was PBS. I was watching PBS, and they just did a story on the ocean sea surface temperatures, and that's been great. That's been getting in the news. But then they talk about how it's going to cause ocean sea level rise faster than we thought. But it's like, I mean, sure, that's obviously a crisis, but then they keep saying 2100 and stuff, and it's like, okay, well, we might not have food like this summer. Like there's already the UN is officially saying 309 million people will need food this year. And that's a record number of people, and it's not on the news. It doesn't get covered on the corporate news. Um I'm not surprised. I mean, I didn't used to watch corporate news because I already knew when I was in college I didn't watch TV. I just read academic books and all that, and I was living in Alaska in the wilderness when the first Gulf War happened in 1990 when they invaded in what was it, 91 or 90. I came back and it was just like, is there eclipse right now? I know there's a full moon and the equinox. And okay, that that climate emergency forum, they shadow banned me. The lady who runs that channel, I think, she was overly sensitive. You know how I like to razz. You know how I am, Sandy. Like, she obviously thought I was just some troll, which admittedly I am a troll, but I also have, I have credentials. But no, I got shadow banned by that those two channels, the Emergency Climate Forum and the Fu- Facing the Future. Both those channels, they're you know they're pushing the veganism, which is fine. I used to be I was vegan for like 10 years. Oh really? Oh okay. Oh okay. He's gonna talk about that on Friday, probably. Is what you're saying? Right. Yeah, Paul. I mean, yeah, I watch Paul's channel too. Paul, he spews out a lot of data. Like, he likes to read papers and stuff. And I understand, he's trying to make a lot of content and then get donations, and he's relying on the donations and all that. And that's, it's a free world, right? Like, people need money. And I'm just saying that it's easy to get lost in the weeds. Whereas like Guy McPherson, he just cut to the chase. He's like, So he and Paul, they had a falling out, because Guy McPherson right away, he's just like, well, we're doomed because of the when you take into consideration the aerosol masking effect. Like this whole thing about adaptation. I should point out, I had a friend of mine who she got paid to attend a global warming conference, and it was put on by this big corporate institute. Yeah, yeah, Guy McPherson, he's like the old school. He's a conservation biologist, and in my view, he had like he pointed out, he's like, E.O. Wilson was the first to publish that we are facing a ex- crisis, mass extinction of species crisis in 1992. Now, in 1992, I was reading E.O. Wilson's book for when I took conservation biology and sustainable development in Costa Rica. I did that for a semester at the School for Field Studies. So like I can relate to Guy McPherson. Like I already knew we were doomed by 1996 because of my conservation biology research. A third of my undergraduate credits were in conservation, in ecology and biology and limnology, or ornithology. Sorry, I mispronounced it. It's been like 30 years. Anyway, I took, environmental economics, and I realized it was all a big scam. My degree was in sustainable development, and I was supposed to integrate economics, political science, and biology. And I discovered they're all lying about each other. And I wrote a book about it called The New Academy Education for Sustainability. It was basically a compilation of my undergraduate papers. And my activist buddy, he put it in the Historical Society in Wisconsin. Oh, thanks, Sandy. That's nice of you to say. Yeah, I mean, I've been an activist. I was a doomer, but in 1996, I realized we were doomed. I remember the exact moment. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, close your eyes, and I'm really good at putting people to sleep. So, okay, I'm just rambling here. Oh, my point was this whole word adaptation. So, my friend, she got a grant from the university adaptation. There's a new climate adaptation institute or something at the university, and I yeah, I'm definitely silly. Um anyway, so she got paid to go sit in this audience. She got like they paid for her flight, they paid for her, whatever, the hotel, and then they gave her money just to sit there for the weekend or whatever, to be in the audience, for a global warming conference where the people sit on. It's on YouTube, but it's not even worth watching in my view. I mean, they're well-meaning people. They're activists. They're policy, and they're being paid by some. I looked on the board of the people on the nonprofit, and there's like 10 people. They're all making like $400,000 a year each. Ah, hey, thanks. Yeah, I know. I mean, we all got to try to survive, obviously. Like I like being alive. And I want people to be alive to see how bad things get. It's really terrible of me, but it's like the denial fascinates me, and it's like the worse things get, then the less people can be in denial about it. And I just find it really fascinating. Like as things get worse and worse, people start to realize it's like, oh wait, maybe maybe we really aren't civilized. Maybe this isn't really progress, all this high technology, um live streaming and whatnot. um yeah, I mean, i I ate out of dumpsters for 10 years. I was pretty much carbon negative for a while there. I rode a old British 3-speed bicycle, ate out of dumpsters, and then I worked part-time at an environmental nonprofit. and I did that for 10 years, and then I read one scholarly book a day while I was doing that because I had enough free time, and, yeah, so this whole thing, like, you look at the universities now, and they're like, "We can adapt," and they're focused on adaptation, but they're missing the big picture, which is that's what, Guy McPherson is really pointing out. He just uploaded a new video where he was critiquing, Tim, what's his name? Um, I know the guy he was critiquing, I know his work. I've watched it online, and he's a physicist, but I don't really agree with his views on quantum physics. And no, 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 it's let me look it up real quick. It's just some quantum physicist. He's been pushing chaos theory. He's pushing his own sort of, physics views, and he's sort of like Sabine Hassenfelder, where Sabine Hassenfelder, she has her own views and she promotes them on YouTube, right? But she's not really that correct. Like so you have like some physicists, they're starting to talk about global warming, like finally. Like it's in my view, it's really kind of sad when people they go to university and they want to have the American dream or whatever, and they just sell out right away. Like, I had this conversation with my housemates in at the university when I was an undergraduate, because they're trying to be upwardly mobile, so they want to go into science because they know, if you go into science you could probably get a better paying job, versus liberal arts degree, right? And I'm just like, look, we don't need more science, we need activism, we need policy change. And they're looking at me like they just they just ignore me because they have to pay for their tuition. I worked when I was in school, but I had my parents paid for the tuition. Yeah, it is all math, right? Well, that's a great point. And people aren't willing to talk about the math. I mean, you had Albert Bartlett, his talk, energy, arithmetic, and population, where he said, well, the problem is the exponential function, and people don't understand it. Now, what he didn't he kind of implied this, but um, it's now like who is it? I was listening to somebody, I can't remember who I was listening to, but they were pointing out, like, oh, it was that I was listening to this guy, the homeless romantic. He has a podcast, and he interviewed one of the Greenpeace co-founders. And I worked for Greenpeace. I worked for Greenpeace full time in 1996 when I realized we were doomed, and that's when I learned about like global warming too. Like, but anyway, but this Greenpeace director, he's like, if you look at like wolves and I don't know what he said, rabbits or something, I can't remember, but he's just talking about how in normal ecology, the populations, they cycle, they will spike and then they collapse and they cycle like that, where wolves and deer, so the wolves will eat too many deer, and then so then the wolf population will drop down. But he's like, the problem is with humans, we used our brains and the technology, so we're taking down all of life, we're causing this huge spike, we're using more resources than we're contributing back to ecology every year, the overshoot um, idea. And then but so then um, as exponential growth, right? And so um, But okay, so Albert Bartlett, the whole thing is that wasn't always the case with humans, right? So this exponential math, it actually comes from Platonic philosophy. And so the problem is when people become scientists, when they study to become a scientist, they are already relying on Platonic philosophy, because all of science, like, math is called the queen of the sciences. It's not technically a science, but it's the language of science. And so, like, when I took mathematics when I was 14 years old, I realized the Pythagorean theorem was a lie. now that's I didn't tell anybody because I knew better, because obviously it's considered the most proven math theorem on the planet, but it's the basis of logarithms. The Pythagorean theorem was the first logarithmic, when you have the what they call the power axiom set, which is the square root of 2. Um and it's so it sounds crazy to say that, but if you look into it, like there's a couple of philosophy professors, they published in 1999. They said, did the Greeks discover the irrational? And they say no, they did not, because there's a logical error in the Pythagorean theorem. Now, there's also something called the non-commutative Pythagorean theorem. And so the thing is that they're both based from music. Like originally mathematics comes from music. And so the reason I knew the Pythagorean theorem was wrong was because I realized it was from the wrong music theory. And that else that ties into Platonic philosophy. And so because it turns out that even in democracy, how democracy is defined, Plato originally said that each citizen is valued at 9/8, uh, um, and nine eighths being the major second music interval, and that each citizen must compromise for the good of the state. And by compromise, he meant as a logarithmic value. So what they did was they took numbers as ratios, and then from music, and then they cubed it for the tritone, so that's the square root of 2. So when you cube 9/8, you get a close approximation of the square root of 2, and that's the tritone music interval. So like in Greek philosophy, it's all interwoven. So you have this you have democracy. Yeah, in other words, even the concept of democracy assumes exponential growth for the elite, because what you have each citizen is actually a logarithm. And we think we're voting, as a unit, like each individual is voting, but we're actually tied into this exponential growth mathematical system that you could call the matrix if you want to call it the matrix. But and so, so yeah, it's definitely all about the math, because even if you're a scientist, you're gonna be using commutative geometry. And so what I was calling it complementary opposites, but I realized the secret I had discovered in music theory, it's actually called non-commutative geometry. And so it's not like some woo-woo thing. It's actually like really high level physics, and it's such a high level that most scientists, they don't learn about it, or if they might have heard about it, but they just kind of dismiss it because they've been so brainwashed for their whole careers that they can't come to grasp, with the true meaning. No, it's not sacred geometry, because it's technically called quantum algebra, and you're literally using matrices mathematics. So you're using ratios, and what you're doing is you're dealing with time and frequency directly. So it's before space-time exists. And so this is what they call non-locality in quantum physics, which means it's a instantaneous information transfer. And I took quantum mechanics my first year of college, at Hampshire College, and the Professor Herbert J. Bernstein, he went on to get hired by the NSA and his research was classified top secret without him knowing about it first. And then they contacted him, and then he got hired by NASA to design the quantum teleportation satellite system, which they're still testing out. Yeah, so most people never hear that. See, people hear about quantum entanglement, but they assume that quantum entanglement is this contrived experimental situation that then disappears really fast. But when you have non-commutativity in quantum biology, what happens is you can maintain that non-local instantaneous resonance into the macro scale of biology, and you can do that through meditation. And that's why in non-Western philosophy and in Pythagorean philosophy, the emphasis was actually on meditation in silence based on listening. And there's a secret to music as listening that then enables you to tap into essentially what in science they now call quantum negative entropy as the foundation of life in the universe. And so Roger Penrose, he's like, this is the secret of life, of the sun. The power of the sun actually is not from thermal. Yeah, his point is that the true power of the sun is not from thermonuclear fusion, as most people think, but it first requires quantum entanglement. And in order to have that quantum entanglement, you have to have gravitational potential energy. And that gravitational potential energy is from this non-commutative non-locality of time and frequency. So essentially, you have the future and the past overlapping. And since it's based on frequency, there's no longer spatial distance. So it's an instantaneous frequency that overlaps. And so then the math, it's that's why it's not geometry, because it's beyond what you can see, but you can listen to it. That's the irony, is that in non-Western philosophy, you can actually listen to this superluminal signal from the future. Thanks, Sandy. I figured you were asleep by now. um, no, no, I'm glad you're interested. I mean, I will rant and ramble about. I know a little bit about anything, kind of, and a lot about nothing. um, so okay, so like okay, for example, basically, if you'll permit me to be, to talk about myself some more here, but um, okay, so I figured out we were doomed by okay. Well, all right. So by 1996, I realized we were doomed, but I also realized there was no point in telling anybody because there's nothing we could do about it, and they wouldn't believe me anyway. And so then, I did this research on the music theory and stuff that I was talking about. I wrote a monograph about it, and I got a professor from the University of Minnesota. He wrote me. I had quoted his work, and so he wrote me a nice complimentary letter. And so then I use that to apply to this graduate program, and that's a self-design. They call it liberal studies, and liberal studies was originally like this aristocratic degree. Like in the Renaissance times or whatever. I don't know. Like it was. It's back when science was called natural philosophy and stuff, and it turned out my neighbor from across the street was on the admissions committee. I think he was a university English professor. I didn't know that at the time. I think my mom mentioned it to me. Anyway, I got into the university, and then I kept doing activism because my whole point was like I was already I had already been arrested. Um, probably more than once at this point. I kept doing activism, and I started getting into meditation because I was wanting to test out my theory about this secret of music as like a free energy through meditation. I realized it was a secret of non-Western philosophy. And so then I was trying to integrate this all together, and I wrote my master's thesis about it. And then this guy contacted me. I had done mainly activism, for my graduate degree, and they wanted to get rid of me and whatever. Like the president of the university, he even emailed me. He's like, "Please do not go on unlimited hunger strike. You've done enough already." Um, and we got some policy changes done. We did, and the treasurer of the university, she got fired for helping me out. Which, I felt not. I can't prove it was for helping me out, but they went after she said she was gonna get rid of the divest the tobacco stocks because they use slave labor, and she was African American and progressive. And we got Total Oil. They divested from Total Oil. That was $1.5 million. um I initiated that campaign because I was a co-founder of the Minnesota Free Burma Coalition, and my friend who was a refugee from Burma, he'd been a lawyer in Burma, and it's like, well, the Burmese, they had to smuggle out this report about the slave labor that Total Oil was using, to build pipelines. I think it was like a natural gas pipeline or something. Anyway, so I did a lot of activism at the university, and then when I finally wrote my master's thesis, nobody could understand it. And I wasn't sure I could understand it. And then this guy contacted me. He said he wanted to publish it, and he was a physics major, and he published music books. And then he started asking me questions like, well, he admitted he did not understand it, and his wife had wanted it published, and then I read his book on music and fractals, and then I noticed an error in my own master's thesis, and it had to do with mathematics, and so then I realized that because a fractal has to be commutative geometry, and he pointed out that the yin yang, the tai chi symbol, the yin yang, that is not a fractal because it's not symmetric. It has to be symmetric geometry to be a fractal. And then I realized, okay, that's the big error I made because I had found some paper by these like Chinese scientists saying that a logistic equation is the tai chi symbol, and logistic again being from logarithms, commutative geometry. And so I just figured, well, they must know what they're talking about. But then I realized no, so I discovered this Fields Medal math professor. And the Fields Medal, most people have never heard of the Fields Medal, but it's harder to get than the Nobel Prize, and it's just for math professors, and I think you have to be younger than 35, and they only give it out every 4 years. And he got the Fields Medal for focusing on non-commutative geometry. And he had this new book called Triangles of Thought, and he talked about music theory in there. And I was reading it. It was just like in the library. Yeah, it's so I realized he had discovered the same secret I had discovered about music theory, and I'm like, well, maybe he's just being metaphorical, because a lot of scientists will use music as a metaphor. And so I kept doing more research. At this point, I had gotten my master's degree, but I discovered I was digging around in the basement of the used bookstore by the university because at this point I was full on nerd. Like I had pretty much left activism, and I was just obsessed with research and doing meditation at this point because I finished my degree by testing out my theory doing intensive meditation with a Chinese spiritual healer. He was a yoga master. He trained at Shaolin, and then he did 28 days of nonstop full lotus meditation at Mount Ching Cheng. His name's Chen Yilin. This is his website, and so when he finished his meditation, he got out of the cave and he was in full lotus meditation. He levitated up 9 feet, and he was spiraling up while he was in full lotus meditation. And of course, most people would not believe that, but at this point, I had experienced so much from meditation. I saw ghosts. I know that ghosts are real, and I also, I had lots of other energy experiences like telepathy and long distance healing and precognition and stuff like that. And and when he does energy healing on you, it feels like a laser. Like he can do it from long distance, and he can go in the middle of your skull, and you'll feel like this laser in the middle of your skull, even though it's long distance. And so I had gotten into that training because I was testing out my music theory idea, and I'd realized that, because I had found this book on biosonics by John. This guy, he got a PhD in I think it's like psychiatry or something, but he he got into this music healing, and he pretty much discovered the same secret where he's like the perfect fifth is yang and the perfect fourth is yin in music, in non-Western Pythagorean music theory. And I read that in 1996, and I realized, okay, this is the secret of the this is the same music free energy secret that I had discovered in high school on my own. And now I'm realizing it's actually called non-commutativity in quantum. It's a like a unified field theory in. And so at any rate, yeah, so then my master's thesis, there's somebody I discovered this book called um it was published by a think tank by the UN, and it's all about the music logarithmic spiral. And essentially it's the exact same concept I had been there's this professor Oliver L. Reiser, and so he discovered the same thing that I discovered about music theory. Yeah, well, if you're into Edgar Casey, you got to read this book called The Stargate Conspiracy by Lynn Picknett and Clive Prince. They have a talk on YouTube that I sent it to somebody. I talked on her. Do you know Julia Commons? She had me talk on her show. um, I sent her that the link of them talking, and she didn't want to listen to it. She's like, yeah, they. See, okay, there's Western mystics, and then there's non-Western philosophy. And the problem is, of course, is that the whole world's been westernized, right? Like China has communism, and that's Western, and India has been Western, British colonialism and communism and all that. And I mean, um, so
But you stand there and your brain kind of skids on it.
yeah, okay. Here's their talk. If you listen to their talk, that's just one of their talks, but you'd have to read their book. Their book should be on archive.org where you can read it for free, on archive.org. But their book came out around when I finished my master's degree, and I read their book, and the CIA actually shut down their website, because they're arguing that the New Age is basically part of the CIA propaganda. And at any rate, another great writer on this is David F. Noble. David F. Noble. If you read his book, The Religion of Technology. Now he refused to even use email, and he was a MIT history professor, and he was hired to do a Smithsonian Institute exhibit, and he did it on the Luddites, and he got one of the actual Luddite hammers that they used to smash the machines. And so the Smithsonian canceled his exhibit because it was too, anti anti technology. And and he discovered at MIT that the aristocrats, they control science, like, and this goes back, like even Galileo was like, he could only get his funding for his science if he promised the aristocrats who cut down on labor costs that his research would save the aristocrats labor cost money. And yeah, you find it's like I'm not against science, because science is our religion of our, we're all dependent on science, just like the Middle Ages were dependent on whatever, the Catholic Church or something. I don't know, like whatever religion people had. Um, so I'm just pointing out the irony of scientists. They're like this solution of algae. It's it's too simple of a solution because it's not based on technology. And if you're a scientist, you get trained in Platonic philosophy and commutative geometry and all that. So you get somebody like Albert Bartlett comes along, and he gave the same lecture. Have you seen his lecture yet? His lecture is Arithmetic, Population, and Energy. So he literally gave that same lecture in person over 1,000 times. As that was his professor career, and I just think that's a really, that's a really awesome thing to do. But he was pointing out the problem, but he didn't really have the solution. Now, you know, if commutative geometry is the problem, and he called it exponential growth, but in terms of mathematics, the exponential function is the inverse of logarithms. And so you have this framework, like even Marxism, a lot of these global warming like YouTubers, they're actually Marxists, they're socialists, and they're trying to assimilate global warming into a socialist critique, and so they can't get away from this. Like it's still too Western, and so like they'll like even the idea of democracy, it still depends on basically like imperialism. Ancient Greek democracy, it still relied on this expanding imperialistic, you know exponential growth. And there is an economist who figured this out, Michael E. Hudson. Have you ever heard him on YouTube? Using your phone to pay at the store. I've never done that. I don't I don't have a smartphone. I used to have a smartphone for my job. Yeah, Michael E. Hudson, he's fascinating. He was on his dad was from the same city that I'm from, Minneapolis, and his dad got put in federal prison for I don't know if it was treason or something like that. I think it was like forced overthrow of the government, one of those things. But they were part of the Teamsters strike in the 30s, and but Michael E. Hudson, he started out in music and training in music in college, and then so he's been studying ancient economics. And so, for example, um, Christianity actually grew out of the concept of the Jubilee year. So I think it was every 7 years they would cancel debt. They canceled all the debt for the farmers because back then your debt was paid, I think with food or whatever. But your surplus harvest, I don't know. But the point being is they knew back then that the financial debt grows exponentially because of the interest rate, whereas the natural productivity of the land is cyclical. You have droughts and whatever, flooding and all that. I mean, and so they knew well enough that every 7 years you just have to cancel the financial debt. And his claim is like, well, Christianity actually originally it started out, in that type of environment where it was trying to enforce the Jubilee debt cancellation. And of course that he's a big proponent of debt cancellation now because he's like, well, land is a monopoly, right? So if once you own land, then you can the market value will keep going up for the land. And then you can deduct the depreciation of the capital in terms of the repair costs and building and all that, and then they have it so you can deduct the interest on your loans. So right there you have a guaranteed profit if you have real estate, because land is monopoly, and if as long as population keeps growing, then there's always going to be demand for land. So that's like how somebody like Drumpf made it. I actually have a cousin, and he started. My dad helped him start into the commercial real estate business, and so there's a big commercial real estate business in my area that's with my last name. That was started by my cousin. But That's a whole nother story. Um, but it's the same principle. Once you understand that scam, essentially, then you're going to be. I mean, you're going to be highly leveraged, right? But and then when the financial system collapses, as it did with the Great Recession in 2008, then you're going to get bailed out because you're too big to fail because the whole system has to rely on that, financial exponential growth, which brings us back to the real economy, which is based on ecology, right? So if you have drought and you can't grow food, then I mean, it's been well known, the foundation of civilization is the soil, the quality of the soil, and you have to keep the soil fertile. But after World War II, they switched to synthetic. Yeah, that's a great movie, right? So with the synthetic fertilizers, obviously, then they claim, well, we had the Green Revolution and we were able to double population of the planet, and it stopped all these famines, and but what they don't mention is that they had to rely on all these herbicides and pesticides that killed off all the wildlife, and they had to do this use tons and tons of extra water use, intensive, irrigation, and with the wells depleting the water reservoir. And so, like when I was at the university in, I think it was 1999, I had a op-ed published on the water crisis sucks us into global revolution. And I had all the latest science that said in 25 years we will be in a global water crisis, and so here we are. It's 25 years later, and Mexico City is running out of water, and you know the Southwest is obviously they. I mean, they say California's out of drought now, but I don't know how long that's gonna last. Obviously you still have the drought. It's mainly the Midwest is in drought. Yeah, so I mean, so if you don't want to be considered a loser, like a loser, you gotta pursue the American dream. So like even in the environmental nonprofits where I worked, they were just mainly they weren't serious environmental activists. They were like one place where I worked at, the IRS fined the nonprofit when the nonprofit actually did real activism. The IRS cracked down on them and fined them, and so after that they just stopped doing real activism for the most part. Um, and as long as you're not rocking the boat too much, nobody really cares. And they'll keep giving you money and stuff because it's like it takes away your sense of guilt or whatever. And so you have these basically like fake environmental organizations. And there was a lot about this on there's this website called Counterpunch. Um, you ever read that? But they had this, they were exposing back in the 1980s and the 1990s how, the Rockefeller Foundation, which that's oil money, right? But they were funding all these environmental organizations. And I mean, the basic idea is if you can assimilate, it's a lot easier. Like the CIA does that too, where it's a well-known fact now that a lot of the 60s, 1960s protest groups were getting CIA money from foundations. Um, so you have all these foundations that are actually conduits for CIA money. Like my dad, he got CIA funding, and I'm sure he did not know it, but he got a Ford Foundation grant to critique socialism in Sweden in the late 1950s. Yeah, the Rockefellers and Monsanto. I'm reading a book right now on IG Farben. IG Farben. It's called Hell's. What is it called? Hell's something. Hell's Cartel. Hell's Cartel. On IG Farben, basically, like when you look at the Nazis, they could not exist without IG Farben, which was like the third biggest corporation in the world at the time. Yeah, and so they had IG Farben literally had they were called a panoply. What they created a new term for it, panopoly. Panopoly. Yeah, because they literally had like hundreds of cartels in all over the world, you know. And so what they would do is they would the big thing is patent law, right? And it's obviously still a big deal, right? It's a big thing where if you can control the patents in other countries, then you can actually prevent other countries from producing certain products. And so that's how Germany really built up their war machine because they actually controlled the production in the US and the UK by controlling the patents. And that got you into synthetic fertilizer and I just started the book. I haven't finished. I should be reading it right now. No. But anyway, so this goes back to Platonic philosophy as well because there's a book called The Paper Economy. The Paper Economy by David David Bazelon, and he wrote it for one of those think tanks in DC, like a progressive think tank. Can't remember, but anyway, like this whole idea of patent law, where that goes back to Platonic philosophy, essentially, where you're controlling the technology and you're integrating it um, with the mathematics and everything else, and so when you say it's all mathematics, well, so you have these scientists and they're critiquing global warming, but the actual mathematics that they're using to critique global warming actually caused global warming, and they're not going to know about this non-commutative math because in the end it's not really math. It's from music theory. It's from music. And if you look at who we are as a human species, if you study anthropology, well, it turns out it's been proven now we had this a music healing culture for over 70,000 years. And like I mentioned that recently on a YouTube video, and people were getting really upset. They're like, there's no way, humans, we've always been changing and you can't prove that that's the same culture. But they've done this using, DNA analysis and just archaeology, anthropology. Well, okay, cymatics again. If you read Hans Jennings' book on cymatics, Hans Jenny, like at the very end of that book, he gets into Pythagorean, the Pythagorean tetractys, because in music theory, it's all based on this very simple but radical concept: 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the Pythagorean tetractys. So you have the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth. So, but the problem is that what cymatics does is they're using number ratios to create you know s- sort of like self propagating patterns in geometry, and then arguing that that's the origin of the growth of geometry of matter. And in a way that's true, but there's a deeper, see, the irony of non-commutative non-locality is you cannot visualize it because it's superluminal and it's instantaneous. So you have to study the quantum biology of Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose. Have you ever if you look up Roger Penrose, he had, he got the Nobel Prize a couple years ago. He's like 90, I don't know, I think he's like 94 or something. And he just did a couple talks on the Science of Consciousness conference YouTube channel. And nobody really, it's not one of these whatever you call it. It's not a viral channel. If you go to that channel, Science of, uh, and you look up his talks, he's promoting precognition. He's saying that in quantum physics they call it proto consciousness, and so that's what non-locality is. It's actually information. It's what they call active information. So it's guiding us from the future, and he's saying that the truth of our awareness actually originates from precognition from the future, and you can have precognitive visions through meditation. I've experienced this, and there's a great book about this called Transcendent Dreaming by Christina Donnell, and the book won some award, and she got a PhD in psychology, but she also studied meditation in the Andes with some traditional Andean indigenous culture, and she also trained in Tai Chi. She competed in Tai Chi around the world. Okay. Transcendentalists like Emerson? Like you mean like Emerson and Thoreau? Those transcendentalists? Anyway, yeah, like most people, like I was I contacted this math professor, yeah, Thoreau. My mom was always trying to get me to read Thoreau. I'm like, yeah, actually went to, I think I saw that Thoreau's cabin or whatever. I think I went there. I was when I was out east, when I was in school out east, and I wish I could remember, but that was like over 30 years ago. Um, so anyway, yeah. So essentially, I mean, okay, we're all gonna die, right? And then we have ghosts inside of us. Everybody has a ghost inside of us, and so then the question is, Walden, right? Thanks, Zelipa. And how's T-Bird doing today? Um, yeah. So the question then, if you really think about it, it's like, well, what powers the ghost inside of us? Like when the ghost leaves our body, what powers it? And this is essentially this non-commutative non-locality, is that all of matter is made of light. If you there's some physicists point this out. There's a paper called "Light is Heavy" by Gerard de Hooft, and he has the Nobel Prize also, but he co-wrote that with another guy who's no longer alive, and then that guy worked he collaborated with this other physicist called John G. Williamson, and he makes the same point also, that all of matter all of matter is actually made of light, but the thing is that it has the same mass, but there's this secret where the mass is actually has a kinetic energy to it because it's based on momentum, and the momentum is directly proportional to frequency because it's quantum. So the quantum momentum is directly proportional to frequency, and they're all relying on Louis de Broglie's law of phase harmony. And so essentially, you get back to this idea of time and frequency. So in other words, even when we become ghosts, there's this deeper um, energy, active information that we cannot see. Nobody can see it, and so that's what meditation, it ultimately relies on listening. And and yet, well, I know that like Emerson, he studied non-dualism. Now the problem with the Western um understanding of non-dualism is they think of it as a static realm. Now that's true in the sense of when you turn the light around, like in meditation, you turn the light around, and that that's what they call the self in non-Western philosophy. But that's not that's not the that's still not the formless awareness. what they call proto consciousness in quantum physics, this formless awareness. It's like this active information that's also an ether energy. And I just posted a video about Basil J. Hiley's latest paper where he's discussing he just calls it extra energy. It's an extra energy or force that's been discovered, and it's still not recognized by mainstream physics. Like even Sabine Hassenfelder does not recognize it. Like she's on YouTube all the time talking about every supposed physics. She dismisses it because see, want to bring it back to mathematics, almost all physicists, they're brainwashed by this commutative geometry. And so they end up learning quantum physics from the perspective of relativity. Now, when I took quantum physics my first year of college, and my professor, his big emphasis was like everybody should learn quantum physics as their first physics course because the foundation of reality is actually from quantum physics. And he said like the problem is people take classical physics in high school, so they get brainwashed by the wrong foundation of reality, and that becomes hardwired. And so like if you look at the ecological crisis, it's just as much a crisis of our wrong education as much as it's a crisis of technology and whatever. um so I mean, I think like in terms of what could fix it, like you asked about the methane and it turns into CO2. I mean, it's probably too late, but I do think that if we did grow algae like really fast, if we had like this, I don't think it's going to happen, but I mean, algae can survive in extreme environments too. So algae probably will survive the abrupt global warming. There's a physicist, Raymond Pierre Humbert, and he's a he was a physics professor at University of Chicago, and he's like the expert on the quantum origins of global warming. And then he he's now at Oxford. He's the Oxford geophysics professor, and he recently did a it's on YouTube where he did a presentation to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists on the doomsday clock. And he argued that abrupt global warming is worse than nuclear war. Than if we have nuclear apocalypse, that actually abrupt global warming, the effects of it will last 10,000 years. But since that will cause biological annihilation, that it's going to take probably like millions of years for complex life to evolve again on Earth. But I think the algae will survive in extreme environments. It can still survive, and algae's been on Earth for 4.6 billion years. And the thing about algae is it relies on photosynthesis. Um, some algae can survive where there's hardly any light at all, and they're still trying to figure it out. Oh yeah, Bob Green. Yeah, Bob Green. Yeah, it's like a yeah. He has this thing about the uh the plasma balls things that they studied those. I eat algae every day. You can get what I ordered. I You've heard of this now? Now spirulina. I emailed them and they're like, yeah, we get it from China. And I looked it up and it's because it's USDA organic. And I found the farm in China, the business, and it's on YouTube. They seem totally legit. And so I just ordered it on AliExpress because it's half price. Because all Now does is they buy it from China and then they slap a brand on it and they charge you twice the price. Anyway, yeah, the thing about Bob Greenyer again, I was Well, thanks for your comment, Misunderstood. It's a great name. Um, you might know me from that scene, that like anti-gravity alternative propulsion research scene, because I was involved in that research scene. But I think they call it EVOs. That's what he calls it. They have an acronym for that. Um, yeah. So um, there is like this John G. Williamson. He's in, involved in that scene also, and he calls it the super strong force. Um, and he thinks that Sapphire project. He thinks that they are okay. So he thinks the Sapphire project is the real deal, and that they're messing with this super strong force, and they don't understand it. And he said that when he did the calculations on engineering this type of fusion using this super strong force, that it would blow up the whole planet. That's how much power it has. And now it kind of reminds me, like, did you see the Oppenheimer movie that's been gotten out all the accolades? My mouth is getting, but okay, so that was one of the fears when they tested the atom bomb, was that it would cause a chain reaction and basically blow up the whole planet, the atmosphere of the whole planet or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, Oppenheimer. Um I don't remember what they have. Einstein, he brought it up to Einstein. Oppenheimer went to Einstein at the Institute of Advanced Study, and Einstein was like, "I don't know. This could happen. You better get it checked out." And then so because it was using quantum physics, they had to use quantum physics to do the calculation. And Einstein, he critiqued quantum physics. I mean, he was one of the founders of quantum physics, but he was also didn't really like it. And then Oppenheimer, basically, they just came up with the calculation that it could happen, but it's such a low, low, low probability that it's basically there's no way it would happen. So they can't rule it out 100%, because because that the type of physics they were doing was all based on statistics. But the thing about non-commutativity is that it's not statistical. Basil J. Hiley's point is that you can, and my own professor, he makes the same point. He published on this too. He's like, he has disproven Einstein's understanding of quantum physics, because that's why Einstein was against quantum physics, because he didn't, he said like God doesn't play dice, and he didn't believe in a statistical foundation of reality. And so with non-commutativity, there's Alon Khan, he gave this talk to physicists. I think he just calls it like an infinite of infinite. Like, it's hard to describe, but essentially, you're dealing with discrete numbers, and they're rational numbers. What was the Sapphire thing were talking about? Oh, well, they're on YouTube too, and most people think it's like a fraud kind of deal, where they're claiming they've achieved fusion, I think, um, and they're still trying to develop it or whatever. But there's all different types of claims about fusion. Like, there's another guy that I've studied, Fabio Fabio Cardone, and he has this device he calls the sonotrode, and he uses ultrasound. I think it's like 15 watts or maybe. Now, this is very interesting, because that's basically what meditation is, because our brain works at like 20 to 25 watts. And what he's using ultrasound, and he's saying that he can create acoustic cavitation. And what he calls it a space-time deformation. So he calls it a he has a whole book about this too, where he's basically saying it's evanescent. In classical physics, they call it an evanescent wave. So by evanescent meaning it's from the future. And so you're having this like a wormhole on the micro scale. And he's saying because you're achieving that with ultrasound through a acoustic cavitation. So they know that they know that sonoluminescence is hotter than the sun. And this is done by the pistol shrimp. They have videos on that where they'll show a pistol shrimp in the ocean snapping its claw, and then it'll create this little bubble of intense light, and that light is actually hotter than the sun for just a brief microsecond or something. But it mainly creates a shock wave that then stuns its prey, and then that's how it eats. But so the thing is that they don't they don't talk about platonic solids, I don't think, in the Oppenheimer. I didn't know about. Do you have who talks who do you have somebody to reference on that? I'd be interested in looking at it. Um the okay, the thing about oh, I didn't know there was a first Oppenheimer. I'll have to look that up. What year when did that come out? About when? I'm not enough of a movie buff to have seen it. Um anyway, so this idea that we could somehow okay, if you look at okay, like if you look at photosynthesis, they know that photosynthesis is actually pretty much like 100% energy transfer, and it's all due to quantum non-locality. Now in science they'll call it quantum entanglement, and then they'll try to recreate it artificially, and they're okay. And it's they're trying to there's like, well, if we can create artificial photosynthesis, I get my mouth gets but anyway, the thing is that what like Roger Penrose, he calls it proto consciousness because it's not just energy. The quantum entanglement as non-locality, it's actually also information. It's active information. And so it's actually the essence of what it means to be alive. All right, we'll see you later. See you later, misunderstood. I don't think I follow you yet. I'll try to look up your YouTube channel. Um anyway, so like when I was in this active in the anti-gravity research scene, they kind of freak out about consciousness because as Westerners, okay, see you, Sandy. As they like um thanks. I don't even know what that means. I gotta look it up. I'm too much of a nerd. Um but we tend to think of consciousness as like this subjective woo thing where you don't you can't measure it. Like in physics they want everything to be off the shelf mass reproduction. Like you have to be able to replicate it in order to prove it. But in non-commutativity, is it takes time to make an external measurement. So as soon as you make an external measurement, you're losing the non-commutativity. So most physicists, they understand non-commutativity as the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And I had this debate with Jack Sarfati, and he's like, no, that's just the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And Jack Sarfati, I mean, I'm nobody compared to him. But the thing is that I've been corresponding with Basil J. Hiley, and Basil J. Hiley, he's definitely somebody compared to Jack Sarfati. I mean, he's like He's older than Jack Sarfati. He's also he was Basil J. Hiley was the collaborator with David Bohm, and David Bohm, directly worked with Einstein. He discussed these issues with Einstein because David Bohm he wrote a famous quantum mechanics textbook, and then David Bohm came up with this different understanding of quantum physics. And so, at any rate, Basil J. Hiley, he's very in one of his talks he gave, he's very emphatic that no, non-commutativity is not the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And it's you get into these like abstract, obtuse, scientific debates, but when it comes down to it, it's very simple. Actually, it's like it's simple logic, and people go to school and they basically they learn by rote because you go to school and you're trying to succeed and you're trying to learn and get a better job or whatever. They can't tell you the higher dimension exists, but well, they can tell you, but they can't experience them. Well, yeah. I don't know. I suppose I think I I'm assuming that like Richard Feynman, he must have done LSD, right? He did you know, he had an interesting thing where he tried to do lucid dreaming, and he said he would try to keep himself awake as he fell asleep, and he would start having lucid dreams, but then he realized that his dreams were they just became like gobbledygook, in his opinion. And then so then he just stopped doing it, and he's like, "This is a waste of time." But the problem is that if you have a precognitive dream, it's actually more real than being awake, and that's one of the ways you know it's a precognitive dream. Yeah, he also went to strip clubs a lot. He went oh, that's another thing. Basil J. Hiley proves that Richard Feynman was wrong. And I kept pointing this out to Jack Sarfati because people love to name drop Richard Feynman. I'm trying to lucid dream and it's sort of working. Okay. Yeah, the more you meditate, like if you take meditation really seriously, not medication, meditation, um, you can have I used to get flying dreams a lot, from meditating. I would get flying dreams, and then I told that to Qigong master Jim Nance, and he goes, "That's just a liver blockage." And I thought about it. I'm like, he's right. He's right because the liver blockage is your yin qi in Taoism. It's called yin qi, which when in Western science we would just call that negative ions. But that's your psychic energy, and you can send out the yin qi out of your third eye as psychic healing, and that's what I do. But you're not supposed to do that because that goes against the alchemy. The alchemy it's based on wan qi, and wan qi is like that's the non-commutative non-locality that I'm talking about. It's like the origin of reality. And when you activate the wan qi, then you're able to see ghosts. You can see ghosts and you can smell cancer in other people long distance. You realize that all of our perceptions originate from this non-local information energy, and this is discussed in quantum biology. Okay. Well, yeah, I think like the thing about meditation is that a lot of it has to do with diet. Like I was really lucky because I was close friends with a guy whose parents were from Taiwan, and he all of a sudden he told me he was vegetarian in solidarity with the Tibetans because he was from Taiwan, and so he was against the like Chinese oppression of Tibet. And so I became vegetarian also, just because I thought it was a cool idea. And that was in high school. And then um I I basically I was so much of an activist that I was pretty ascetic. I didn't, so like a big thing is caffeine. Like if you most people they drink coffee. I drink coffee sometimes, but like Qigong master Robert Peng, if you look up Robert Peng, whoops, Robert Peng. Oh, I'm missing all the, oh, I accidentally here we go. Anyway, sorry, my comment section was weird. Um so, I'm just saying Robert Peng, they also call him the zapping master. Like there's if you look him up on YouTube, he has the ability to zap people like with really strong electrical shocks. It's not just like static electricity. But he says if he drinks coffee, it totally destroys his chi. And think about it, like pretty much everybody drinks coffee, so that right there, that will wipe out meditation for most people. The reverse is more nearly true. Yeah. Oh, that's from Tesla. Yeah. Well, Tesla was another great visionary, right? Like I what's interesting about Tesla is that he kind of blamed himself for the death of his brother when they were young and they were outside and they had some kind of yeah, and I like to drink coffee, but obviously like if you're trying to meditate, it's in other words, meditation really it goes completely against our whole modern society, That's why the meditation class I have it in the morning and because like if you want to see light when you meditate and if you want to see light, you got to have your colon cleared out. You got to you can't have any obviously sometimes, I mean, and then an advanced meditation, they do fasting, but it's not normal fasting. They're actually collecting this energy from this ether, and your skull, your bones will pulsate. The fontanelle opens up like a baby. That soft spot in the top of the head, it actually opens up and it pulsates with the chi. And the center of your hands, they pulsate, and the centers of your feet. And then you can sit in full lotus as long as you want in the Padmasana because your bones get pliable. And that's how they do it is they sit in full lotus. Like the guy I studied from, he sat in full lotus nonstop for 28 days with no sleep the whole time, no sleep. Oh, okay. Yeah, one thing cool about Goethe is he has the triad theory of color. And I like that triad theory of color better than Newton. Newton was using the music scale for the colors, but he got the you know, his is good too, but he's he didn't understand music theory because he was caught up in the logarithmic math, the wrong mathematics. There's literally a space-time vortex. If you read chapter 11, if you study the book Taoist Yoga, Taoist, yeah, right, Roy G. Biv, Taoist Yoga, Alchemy. If you study that book and you go to chapter 11, I think I quoted it. I think it was in my last live stream. I actually quoted it. I read from that book. Um, but they talk about the dizziness, and it's not just dizziness. It's actually the space time vortex, and that's what caused me to stop meditating because I was so freaked out by it. I'm like, the room was spinning around me, but it was not just like being dizzy. It was this energy, and and I had to find out what it was, and I had been fasting for a week, and I had this really strong energy, but you have to maintain a purification of your mind. So it's like deep mind control. It has to do with your life force energy. So like we don't understand like the Brahmins, the traditional Brahmin training. I found one of their training manuals in a used library by the university. And if a Brahmin priest just made eye contact with a female, Then he had to spend 3 days doing purification meditation. So you can understand, like, well, how often do you make it sect or whatever? Like we don't understand. This is about your subconscious nervous system and what triggers it and everything. You have to ride the wave. We already are, but have to tune out as children to focus on only what is seen. Well, yeah, anxiety is see, the other thing about the traditional Chinese meditation or medicine is you discover they talk about the five elements, and literally like each organ of the body is an emotion, and that's due to the electrochemical energy, which is this yin qi. And so what you're doing in alchemy is you're converting the yin qi to yang qi, which is essentially your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. And that's why like coffee or alcohol really messes it up, because coffee keeps you in your sympathetic nervous system. At first you get a dopamine bliss spike from coffee, which is awesome. Everybody loves it, but then your cortisol spikes. And what I notice from coffee is I get, and then if you have too much of it, you'll get your adrenal glands will get overworked, and then you'll get anxious really easily. And so the in the Chinese medicine, they call the kidneys, the emotion is fear. And so the idea is to convert the emotions to the opposite emotions. So like the emotion of the liver is anger. And so like if somebody drinks alcohol, they'll get angry really easily because that's a liver blockage. And then the opposite emotion for the liver is wisdom, and that's the green light in alchemy. And so you're building up that liver green chi. There you go. See, there you go. Like TikTok or YouTube shorts. Oh, okay. You're at work. I don't want to get you in trouble. Oh, but the idea of somebody getting paid to watch my videos, that's a nice thought. Anxiety is another form of creating new brain pathways. Yeah. Well, I mean, we could talk about the whole big pharma scheme too. Like, I'm not trying to I'm not talking about anxiety as some kind of like biological disease or something. Salt. Oh, I'm glad you mentioned salt, because that's definitely a big thing in meditation, which I noticed that just from experience. Um but it turns out I quoted that too. I don't know if you remember, but at the end of the Taoist yoga book, they say that for advanced meditation, you should not have any salt. Now that sounds crazy, but if you look at our original human culture, they didn't use salt. They got their sodium from plants, because plants, greens does that they do have sodium in them if you eat enough of them. And their diet was like 80% greens and nuts, and so they you can get sodium without having salt. But the thing is, yeah, that's the other thing about salt, is that it keeps you in that sympathetic nervous system. I literally have to have tons of orange juice. Like last night, in the middle of the night, I pretty much I didn't, I don't want to drink orange juice because orange juice it's expensive. But the thing is that like we had Parmesan cheese in our soup or something, and Parmesan cheese has extra salt in it for cheese. And um I'm trying to remember. There's usually some kind of salt thing that I have to counteract with orange juice. Now orange juice has a lot of sugar in it, so then I have to put ginger in the orange juice, and I order this powdered ginger. I get organic powdered ginger. I just got it from a new company called like Andes in California, and it's a better price and it tastes better than the other company I was buying it from. They're both from India, but I don't know, it's a different farm, I guess. I don't know. um yeah, I use a lot of ginger for sugar. So yeah, diet. There's a lot to diet, but and then obviously like it depends on how much energy you use up. Like I overused my psychic yin chi energy. I did free psychic healing. I just sat in full lotus in public, but because of my meditation work, I was having all these psychic energy experiences that were like holographic while meditating. Yeah, that's a good one. Really? The greatest number of victims? Huh. Really? Wow. Interesting. On tea also. That's interesting. What about coffee? I mean, chocolate, because chocolate has caffeine in it. So you're saying that the uric, huh? So that's what really causes like people to get kidney stones is from uric acid. I don't know. I don't know. The they were considered high carcinogens, or they are high carcinogens. Huh. What? Why were they called carcinogens? I don't remember them being called carcinogenic. Um. Oh, okay. So you get when you heat it, right? It damages the. Oh, okay. That's probably when they did cold press coffee. Like people were in a cold press. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not, I'm not telling people what to eat or whatever. Like I ate out of dumpsters for 10 years. I literally ate a bulb of garlic like a day or two bulbs of garlic cuz I was eating all this sugar and stuff. But I was also bicycling like 10 miles a day. Well, and how much longer are we going to be able to grow coffee again? Like the reason I started this epic live stream is cuz it's like, well, eating food is nice. Yeah. You eat from the dumpster, but I'll pick the restaurant. I'll eat from That's pretty funny. I only ate from a restaurant once, and it was this nice Italian restaurant. It was like I'm eating spaghetti that's half eaten. It was terrible. I only did that once, and I couldn't handle it. I was like, that was the limit. Like, I can't eat somebody's half finished dinner. I'm trying not to kill. All right. Wow, that's cool though to grow your own coffee. I used to grow my own microgreens too. I had a really big garden too. But I used human manure compost and it was a failure. I mean, I you have to compost it for 2 years. That's all I'm gonna tell you. My friend's like, "You're not supposed to eat your own shit." Exactly. I stock up on everything. All right. You're a real prepper. The last tomato. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. I used to sort tomatoes. I was a tomato sorter. That was one of my jobs. I spent a whole summer surrounded by tomatoes. And then I had to sort tomatoes at my last warehouse job, and I'd bring them to another warehouse, and they would go through each tomato to make sure they were good enough quality. It was total hell. Grow in a jar 3 days. Yeah, yeah. We used to grow sprouts. I grew tomatoes from seed, and I used human or compost with what do you call it? Biomass, biochar, and it was like they grew so well. I had the best tomatoes. Well, congratulations, everybody growing their own food. Um, yeah, like think of the Victory Gardens or whatever during World War II. Before my time, but I think my grandmother must have had them. Water will be the battle. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I've been I've been trying to get water on my land up north. I have 20 feet to go. I have to pound down a pipe 20 feet. So I'm going to rent the gas powered driver. I pounded it down with a hand maul, and I couldn't, my body was so exhausted for like a week. I couldn't, you don't leave your property. Well, you can be a weird prepper. That's all right. Yeah, I hardly go outside anymore because I'm like, what's the point? Oh yeah, Victor Schauberger. Okay. Yeah, he built those the vortexes with the cold water coming in, and he discovered that was quantum negentropy energy. He discovered that by accident. I mean, they call it the fourth phase of water. Oh, okay. You know what I did with biochar is I just dug these big pits and I threw the if you burn it from the top down, if you keep adding more, then the charcoal will just keep building on top. There's videos on YouTube about it where people doing it. I did it, it worked great. It was the easiest way to make biochar. I mean, it's not like 100% energy efficient. Yeah, that was the other thing I did was I saved all my liquid gold, and I added it. But I was doing full on human manure compost, and I thought, well, since I'm using biochar, I don't have to compost as long, and that was turned out to be a mistake. You definitely have to compost for 2 years at minimum. Breaking the soil with metal tools. Yeah, so doing the like what do they call it? The French is that the French gardening? Well, I went to this village in Africa as I'm sure you know because I've mentioned it several times, but I went to the most traditional Berber village in Morocco, and all the women did the farming, and they had farmed that way for thousands of years, and they were completely self-reliant, and it was in the desert, and they grew all their food with human manure compost. And of course, it's the desert, so that's different than the northern Midwest. All right. Now, how many acres do you have to walk on? I'm just curious. It sounds nice though. I'm I don't have any. I have some woods around here, but I don't. There's not even really much walking space where I'm at. There's like a highway right next to us. A Carrington event. Yeah. Wait, what's a Carrington event again? I forgot. um yeah, ticks are I got Lyme's disease. But I self-diagnosed it like immediately, and then I called up the doctor. Oh yeah, solar flare. I called up the doctor and I said I have Lyme's disease, and of course it was the receptionist, and she's like, "Well, we'll determine that." And I'm like, "Okay." And then the doctor was like, "You have an excellent case of Lyme's disease." That's funny. He used the word excellent. And so I caught it right away. Like I caught it like the next day after I had all the classic symptoms, which is like the big red circle, and then you have a tight um, right side of the neck, and you have like really bad fever. Like really bad pains and fever. Um, um, so that's basically it. I'm like, well, we had the power gone out, and so I went out into the woods to read. I was reading a book in the woods, which is kind of like asking for Lyme's disease. Um, okay, well, I guess I guess the whole point the whole point of I did my I'm glad people are talking about their down to earth living though. This is fun. I do have an outhouse, yeah. And you got the humidor book. Ah, well, the great thing about horse manure is you get those micro hairs, and you can use that to make daub. You know, like that's I made that up north. Got free horse manure from down the road, and I hauled it up north, and then I made wattle and daub. I made a wattle and daub hut from a I designed it based on an archaeological site from 1800 BCE. Hey Irma, two gardens, nice. Yeah, you're mentioning you're doing your gardening work, and that's on. Wow, cabbage. See, cabbage is the best. Broccoli is the best too. Potatoes, awesome. Cauliflower. They got they have this big thing about oxalates now. It's like don't eat too much spinach, you'll get oxalates. And I don't know. I mean, I eat spinach, but I'm not. I don't think. I think maybe people are a bit paranoid about oxalates. I know there's a big magnesium deficiency. Magnesium is the number one deficiency in the U.S. diet, and the main source of magnesium is greens. You know, you have elbow pain. Oh, from the tick. Oh, wow. Huh. Interesting. So you think that your immune system kicked in then? The other thing about the Lyme's disease is they're saying it's from the Nazi biowarfare experiments on that one island off of Long Island. I'm worried about my. Oh yeah, Epsom salt. I've never done Epsom salt. My orchard is January again. Yeah. Oh, you got snow, huh? We're supposed to get snow any day now, I think, which is really weird, right? It's like you're not supposed to get snow in the winter. Come on. The winter's it's supposed to be 60 degrees in the wintertime. Come on, Sandy. We will miss all this. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Right. Yeah. He creates the vortices, and what he did is he noticed the trout going against the current in the middle of the stream, and he realized it was from the cold water um creating like a an extra charge to the water that's like anti-gravity. And that was part of it. The other part was like the vortices with their fins and all that. Oh, it's magnesium? I didn't know that. I did not know the Epsom salt. Why do they call it salt then? That's kind of confusing, isn't it? Oh, I think I had a housemate who had to. Is it what color is Epsom salt? I thought it was white. It looks white like salt. That must be why they call it salt. Huh. I use tea tree oil in my feed. I gotta go, y'all. All right. Well, thanks for chit chatting. I didn't expect so much wonderful conversation here. Yep. I know. I grew broccoli in my garden too. Yeah. Well, huh. Full ketosis. So you oh, that's just from the 100% carnivore diet. Interesting. I go into ketosis from fasting. My voice gets super deep because my I go up north and my mom's like, "Have you been eating?" And she thinks I've been eating because my voice is super deep, but it's like I've been eating my own fat. I've been eating. I don't tell her that, but I'm like, yeah, I've been eating. Well, this new meditation we're doing is basically intermittent fasting because I've been adding I added another hour of the sitting meditation. So we finish for me, it's like I think it's like pretty close to noon by the time we finish. So that's puts you on the 16-hour fasting cycle. Okay. Yeah, 20 grams. That's pretty low though. Um Ah, all right. Well, that's nice that they like those eggs must be really high quality eggs too. Huh. Okay. Yeah, because that's what streams they naturally do that curvature, and they cut themselves off. Well, I don't know if magnesium it's a mineral is a salt. Okay. I don't know enough chemistry to because I thought it's salt. Oh yeah, salt is basic. I know that. Minerals are basic too. Yeah, so that makes sense. Ah, cool. That's really nice. Yeah, the farm I help out on, they have chickens and their eggs are super bright orange yolks, and then they have a big vegetable farm, vegetable garden, and they do the regenerative agriculture. Actually, that that farmer, she's a big farm organizer in the state also. Well, we might be doing a lot more fasting. I don't, I don't mind being fat now because I'm like, famines, famine happens. Like it could, I guess in Central Europe, they know that it's better to be fat because you survive the famines. And um, I don't know. I'm just saying that the way things are looking. I mean, if okay, yeah, I mean, I would prefer to be vegetarian. I'm on the scavenger diet. I was vegetarian for I don't know, at least 10 years. 10 years when I was in high school. I used to eat like I was literally a soy boy when I was at my first year of college. I would eat like huge heaping mounds of soy, and I didn't know it was phytoestrogenic. I, oh, I minded being fat. Oh yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's health consequences also from being too fat, and there's different kinds of fat. It's complicated, but I'm just saying, if there's going to be a famine, then it's probably right. Well, they have the fourth. Have you studied Easy Water? By uh Gerald Pollard, Gerald Pollard. Have you studied that? Where basically you can they've discovered this fourth phase of water. That would I don't want to. It's too heavy to mail jars. I appreciate the offer though. You could probably look up my address if you really want to stalk me. Um, but yeah, you wouldn't want to have to mail something like that because that's think of the energy cost, the environmental cost. But pickles are I love pickles though. Oh, right, right. So you were like, yeah, I can understand that. I I used to be way too skinny my most of my life. I never even thought about it until I was living at my friend from Ghana at her house, and she just started calling me skinny, really skinny, and I'm like, she's from Africa, you know. I'm like, wait, if she's calling me skinny, then I must really be skinny. I did just bulk up for winter. That's what I used to see. What I would do is I used to go up north and I would fast up north, and meditate and fast. Um, but then because of the pandemic, I couldn't. I had to stay around. You know, I had to keep an eye on. I was just joking. I know you can, but no, I'm just saying you can look up my address though if you want. Um, yeah, anyway, so then I just started like I before where we moved. I think environment is 90% of a person's who they are as a person. It sounds extreme, but I'm gonna go for 90% because like where you live, your environment, you know what I mean? Like call it you can call it socioeconomic or you can just call it environmental. They call it, epigenetics. Everybody's still fixated on genetics, but I think environment's like I think nurture is more important than determinism. Yeah. The living thing that is water. Yeah. Actually, Chen Lin, he really loves to meditate by Lake Superior because he says the energy there is so ancient. And they called Lake Superior the native name for they call it like Spirit Lake. Um, but that's yin chi. Water is a source of yin chi in Taoism. And yeah, this idea I worked for Clean Water Action for 10 years, so I mean where I live they claim to have over 10,000 lakes in the state. And but Wisconsin has it's just as many lakes, like 10 to 13,000 lakes. So I grew up right next to a lake, and I would go fishing every day alone pretty much. Like that was how I spent um yeah, I mean I liked it. I just like looking out onto the water, and if you think about it, we're from water, life originates from water. So, but yeah, this fourth phase of water, it's pretty fascinating. You get into quantum physics, that gets you into the whole, it gets into virtual photons and stuff like that. It gets into the whole non-locality stuff. And aha, 7,600 lakes. You remember Sandy, I was supposed to go up there with my mom, but she had an accident. She had an accident. She had to have surgery and stuff, and it was pretty close. It was she she's she recovered, but I hate living atop others' homes. Ah, yeah. So you live in Section 8? I've been thinking about actually going to apply for Section 8 just because I don't know what my future is like, and it's the thing is it's a lottery, right? So it's like, well, what if I got lucky and they called my name and I'm like, well, I don't really need it right now. What would happen? Would they, like I'm kind of like, you know, it's I, I I'll probably just go live in the woods and try to survive. And but the problem is if you try to live off your land, then they come after you and they say it's illegal. You can't camp on your own land. You have to yeah, yeah. My mom's doing well. She's actually better now than she was before her accident. But people bring me their junk fish. Ah, that's pretty. Your cats must be loving that having fish. I mean, come on. You can't, if you're a cat, you can't get better than fresh fish. Yeah, you know, the the whole water thing. I mean, yeah, they like when they do the deep meditation, what they call bigu. Basically, their main, as long as you have enough water, like they like to do it in caves because it stays damp. You gotta have some kind of water source, whether it's from the air, like but other than that, they can just meditate and then oh oh local grants for companies will give you housing and cash. I don't know what companies will do that. I did receive um a generous research donation. It was a donation and they basically said, it's a donation so I can do whatever I want, but it was because of my research. I did research because of the donation. I felt obligated because most people they want to see something. They want to see something. Yeah, I got to get going now. I've been what have we been live streaming over 2 hours, so I could go. I have no obligations to stay in live stream anymore. Well, happy apocalypse, everybody. We are officially facing 309 million people with not having enough food. And my guess is it's going to be twice that many. So I'm glad everybody's growing their own food. And thanks for chit chatting about it. And we will see you in virtual reality very soon. Nonprofits, right? Okay. Yeah, I worked for like half a dozen nonprofits. I will look into that. We have a lot of nonprofits. Well, thank you as always. See you later. Okay, signing off.